You woke before the sun did, and the first thing you felt was the cold. Not the cold of a house, the cold of a room where the fire had died sometime past midnight, where your breath hung in the air above the quilt. And somewhere out past the kitchen door, in the gray light, sat a bucket that needed filling and a pump that needed priming before anyone in that house could so much as wash their face. If you grew up like that, you already know what I mean. And here's the question I want you to hold on to until the very end. How did families who had to work this hard just to get a cup of water end up richer in the things that mattered than most of us are today? Stay with me, because the answer is hiding inside every one of these memories. Let's start where every day started, the hand pump out by the kitchen door. That cast iron handle was cold enough in January to stick to your palm, and you had to pour a little water down its throat first to prime it before it would give anything back. Then came that groan of metal, that first gush that always splashed your shoes, and the smell of iron and whetstone rising up. I can still hear my grandmother saying, "Prime it before you need it, not after." That pump taught you patience before you were old enough to spell the word. Then there was the water bucket that lived by the sink, and the dipper that hung on a nail beside it. Everybody in the family drank from that same tin dipper. You'd lift it, sip, and hang it back for the next person. No germs anybody worried about, just cool well water that tasted faintly of the tin. On a hot August afternoon, that first swallow off the dipper was the finest drink in the world. Sharing it never seemed strange. It was just how a family lived, out of one bucket, from one cup. Saturday night meant the galvanized wash tub dragged into the middle of the kitchen floor. Water heated on the stove one pot at a time, poured in until it was just warm enough, and then the whole family took turns. The youngest went first because the water was cleanest, and by the time it got to Daddy, it was gray and cooling. You bathed once a week whether you needed it or not, and you were grateful for it. That tub was Saturday's whole ceremony, right there in front of the wood stove. And you cannot talk about that life without talking about the outhouse. 50 feet out back, a splintery seat, a Sears catalog hanging on a nail, and a walk you did not want to make at 2 in the morning in the dead of winter. In summer, it was flies and heat. In winter, it was a sprint through the snow in your nightclothes. But here's what most people forget. Nobody complained because nobody knew any different. It was just the far end of the yard, and you learned to hold your lantern steady. Which brings me to the chamber pot under the bed, the slop jar, some folks called it. For the coldest nights and the smallest children, it saved you that frozen walk. In the morning, it was somebody's chore to carry it out and empty it. And Lord help you if it was your turn, you held it out at arm's length the whole way. Humble as it was, that little pot was mercy on a January night. There was the rain barrel at the corner of the house too, positioned right under the downspout to catch every drop off the roof. Rainwater was soft water, no minerals, no iron. So it was prized for washing hair. Mama would rinse my sister's hair in it and swear it made it shine like nothing from the well ever could. When the barrel filled after a good storm, it felt like the sky had done you a favor. You learned early that nothing that fell from heaven was ever wasted. Monday was wash day, and that meant the scrub board and the boiling kettle. Water hauled, heated, and poured into tubs. Clothes rubbed raw against that ridged glass or metal board until your knuckles ached. The whole yard smelled of lye soap and steam. My mother's hands were red and cracked by noon every Monday of her life, and she never once thought of it as suffering. It was just Monday. It was just what clean cost. After the scrubbing came the wringer, that hand crank contraption that squeezed the water out between two rollers. You fed the wet clothes through and turned the crank, and you kept your fingers well clear because that machine did not care whose hand it caught. Then everything went out to dry, no matter the weather. Getting your fingers pinched in the wringer just once was a lesson you only needed to learn a single time. And of course, there was the clothesline, strung between two poles or two trees, sagging under wet sheets, clothespins in an apron pocket, sheets snapping in the wind, and that smell, that clean, sun-dried smell that no dryer on earth has ever matched. Sleeping on line-dried sheets was like lying down in the outdoors itself. In winter, they'd freeze stiff as boards, and you'd carry them in flat like plywood to thaw by the fire. Water had to be carried, and that meant the yoke across your shoulders with a bucket hanging off each end. You learned to walk smooth so the water wouldn't slosh out and soak your pant leg. A full bucket of water weighs better than 40 pounds, and a child carried what a child could. By the time you were 10, you'd hauled more water than most grown folks today will lift in a lifetime. And nobody called it exercise, it was just the morning. In the driest months came the reservoir on the side of the cook stove, a little tank built right into the iron that kept water warm all day from the fire. Dip into it for dishes, for washing up, for a shave. It meant you didn't have to heat every drop from scratch. That warm reservoir was one of the small kindnesses of a hard life. Always there, always ready. Then there was the dishpan, because there was no sink you could just run. 2 pans, one to wash, one to rinse, and the dishwater got saved and thrown out on the garden after, because you didn't waste a thing. The little ones dried and stacked. Standing at that pan with your mother elbow to elbow was where half the family news got told. The work was the excuse, but the talking was the point. You knew the smell of lye soap too, homemade in a kettle out back from ashes and rendered fat. It was harsh enough to strip paint, and it cleaned everything from your neck to the kitchen floor. A bar of it lasted because you didn't waste that either. That sharp, clean sting is a smell that'll take anyone who grew up with it straight back 60 years in a single breath. When the pump froze solid in January, you learned about hauling water from the spring or the creek, an axe in one hand to break the ice. The cows had to drink whether it was 10 below or not. My father would come in with his eyebrows white with frost, set the bucket down, and never say a word about the cold. Some mornings the whole business of just staying alive took until noon. The kettle sang on the stove all day, and that steam was the sound of a house waking up. Hot water for coffee, for the wash basin, for a hot water bottle to warm the foot of a bed. You never let the fire go all the way out if you could help it, because cold ashes meant cold everything. That singing kettle was the heartbeat of the kitchen. Come summer's dog days, water hung heavy in the well, and you rationed. You washed vegetables in the same pan you'd wash your hands, and every drop got used twice before it hit the ground. A drought didn't just wilt the corn, it changed how the whole house lived day by day. You never once thought of water as something that just came out of a wall. You knew exactly where every drop came from and exactly what it cost to get it. The wash basin on the back porch is where everybody cleaned up before supper. A bowl, a bar of soap, a rough towel on a nail. You scrubbed the field dirt off your hands and the back of your neck before Mama would let you at the table. There was a rhythm to it, the whole family washing up in turn as the sun went down. Coming clean to the table was a kind of respect for the food and for each other. On bath night you might share the water, but you always shared the towel too, hung stiff and rough by the stove. Nothing was soft, and nothing was private, and somehow nobody minded. A family that bathes from one tub doesn't have much use for putting on airs. That closeness, living so plainly, so together, is something a lot of folks would trade their whole modern bathroom for now. You learned to read the weather like a second language, because your water depended on it. A dry sky meant a low well. A good soaking rain meant the barrel filled and Monday's wash got easier. Farmers watched the clouds the way people today watch a screen. When you have to catch your water as it falls, you pay attention to the sky in a way city folks never learn. There was the milk and butter kept cool down in the well itself, or in the spring house where the water ran cold over the crocks. No refrigerator, just the earth and the cold water doing the work. You'd lower a jug of milk on a rope and pull it up sweet and cold on the hottest day. That spring house, dim and dripping and cool, was the closest thing a farm had to magic. Winter mornings, you'd find the wash water frozen solid in the basin, a skin of ice you had to crack with your knuckles. You broke it, splashed the shocking cold on your face, and it woke you clear down to your boots. There was no complaining, only doing. That cold water on your face was the first hard lesson of every winter day, and it made you tough without you ever noticing. Every drop of that water got carried in and every drop got carried out. The slop pail by the door for dishwater and scraps, hauled to the hogs, or the garden. Nothing left that kitchen without a second purpose. Waste was almost a sin in a house like that. You grew up understanding that everything had value because everything had cost you something to get. And here's the one nobody expects: the whole family knew, without a chart on the wall, exactly how much water it took to live. You knew a wash day was 40 buckets, a bath night was 10, a garden in July was more than you wanted to think about. That knowledge lived in your arms and your back. You respected water because you'd carried it, and you never in your life left a faucet running because you never in your life had a faucet. So back to that question I planted at the start: how did people working this hard end up richer in what mattered? Here it is. When you have to carry every drop, water becomes precious, and so does the person carrying it beside you. The shared dipper, the shared tub, the shared towel, the elbow to elbow at the dishpan, the hardness of that life is exactly what pushed a family shoulder to shoulder and kept them there. They weren't rich in comfort. They were rich in each other. And that's a kind of wealth that no pipe running into a wall has ever delivered. Which of these do you remember? Drop it in the comments. We read every single one.